What up, reader fam? Welcome back to my channel. Today it's time to take out the trash, weed out the weeds, vaccinate my bookshelf to protect it from bad books.
That was bad.
Today I'm doing a book unhaul. We're getting rid of books. I just did a reorganization video, and in the process of doing that video, I was like, wow. I have a lot of books on my shelf that I've read that I don't like, or that were mediocre at best and need new homes. So I'm gonna go through and cleanse the shelves, give them a little shelf care, because just like humans need self-care, bookshelves need shelf care. Let's do it. First book I have here is The Court of Miracles. Shiny, 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 shiny. This book is pitched as Les Mis meets Six of Crows, with Paris in the 1800s as the backdrop. The way I just want to keep this book because of how beautiful it is. If I were to keep it, it's because of how stunning it is. Like, stunning, shiny, beautiful! I received this in an Illumicrate crate box last year, and I read it last year, but I don't even think I got around to talking about it. I kind of enjoyed it. It wasn't my favorite, it wasn't the best, but I enjoyed it for the most part, and I definitely saw where it's gonna go, but I don't see myself boarding the ship and following it to where it's gonna go. You know? It didn't really have the wow factor, and that's what I'm looking for when keeping books. Like, it's gotta have that it factor. It's gotta stand out among the rest. It's gotta hold its own among the rest, and it just isn't doing that for me. Actually, kind of a lie, because I feel like there's a lot of books on my bookshelf that don't fit that criteria right now. But we're not here to call me a hypocrite today. I loved the atmosphere and the setting in this book, but everything else kind of fell flat for me. It's like when you accidentally don't tighten the lid on a soda, and the next day you take a sip and you want to spew it all over the place because it ain't hitting. That's how it felt, like flat soda. Bye-bye book. Next up here I have Victories Greater Than Death. I read this book pretty recently, like within the last few months. It's a space opera who follows a girl who is the hidden clone of an alien hero, and she's disguised as a human on Earth to defeat a terrible evil, essentially. That's kind of the idea of the book. This honestly, in a lot of ways, gave me Xenon Girl of the 21st Century vibes, and I used to love those movies, but I'm aware that they're probably not the best movies. Like, if they were to be released today, people would tear those movies apart. They're definitely movies that are like sign of the times. Like, if I were to watch them for the first time in the current times, I would be like, what in the nebula is this? With that being said, this felt like a terrible version of Xenon. It had things that I liked. Specifically, it explores sexual identity in a very solid way, but everything about the writing annoyed me, and yet I stuck it out to the end. Why did I do that? I'm not really sure, but I did. I reached the end. But if I were to go back in time and do it all over again, I would have saved myself from doing that because it just wasn't worth it to me. It was overly repetitive and just very immature in a lot of ways. This book felt like a middle grade book that was marketed as a YA book. I feel like maybe I would have liked it if it was a middle grade book, but because it's sold as a YA book, that's what I was expecting going in. That's what we went in thinking we were getting, but that's not really what it delivered in my opinion. Next up, a controversial one, A Little Life. I talked about this book in a recent video in Popular Books I Will Never Read. I have tried to read this book 3 times, I think now, and I just can't do it. So I ended up spoiling myself for this book, and I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. This story follows Jude and his friends who take on college together, and we just follow their experiences. We mostly follow Jude and his trauma and how it kind of impacts his life. I got heart palpitations while reading the spoilers, so what do you think will happen if I actually read the book, actually get invested in the characters, actually get invested in the plot? I'd rather not die at a young age. I've got a plethora of books that I still need to read, and this book could potentially be the cause of my death. Not doing it. Next up I have here Landline. Can you reach me? No, you can't. I've tried to read this book 4 times now, and I just know it's not for me. It follows a marriage that's on the rocks, and one night the wifey picks up the phone and is able to talk to her partner in the past. Will this be the thing that fixes their marriage? I'll never know because I'm not putting myself through it. I actually really love Rainbow Rowell's writing style. There's like a bubblegum pop feel to it. It's addictive and yummy. Typically it's all I want to eat, but there was just no pull for me, and I just didn't care, which I know sounds so bad. I didn't care to find out if they fixed their marriage or not. I hope it works out for y'all, but I just don't want to read about your marriage issues.
This is making me sound like a terrible person, isn't it?
I'm sending y'all the best. I hope it works out for y'all, but that's where I'm ending it. Next up, I'm getting rid of White Rose. This is a historical fiction book that follows an activist that's going against Hitler's regime. I actually enjoyed this book, and it made me emotional by the end of it. Feelings sure did bubble up, but it's not a stick-out book for me, and at this point it's just taking up shelf space. As Olivia Rodrigo would say, God, it's brutal out here. I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is a solid rating, but it ain't a 4 or a 5-star rating, which is a keeper in my book. The story is written in verse, so essentially it's written in a collection of poems, which I actually didn't mind, but it didn't really elevate elevate the story in my opinion. The jumpy timeline was a bit of a flow disruption, and we had a very
I'm not like all the other girls
line in here, which kind of threw me off my game. It's game over, White Rose. Next up, I'm getting rid of Every You, Every Me. This is a thriller-esque book that follows a guy who starts receiving these really strange photos, and some of the photos feature him as the subject. This is a book that honestly felt like a book that was trying to be the most unique book in all of book land. Book. It just ended up at a dead end for me. It had a fun format, and I really loved the idea of using photographs as like prompts for the story, but the execution was just not it. For me, it felt like there was like no structure to it. It just needed some kind of story structure to string it together better. It was like tying together shoelaces together and then trying to run track and field. It's tripping all over the place. I couldn't handle it. I could spend a few hours roasting this book, but I'm gonna swerve out of the negativity lane. And I'll just say it wasn't for me. That's all you need to know. Wasn't for me. Next up, I'm getting rid of Your One and Only. You're not my one and only, because you're getting out of here. This takes place in a world full of clones, and we follow our main character named Jack, who was created by the clones. I remember this actually being a really fun read, but there were some questionable things that I didn't even really think about until I read somebody else's review, and I was like, oh yeah, I could see how that's a very terrible way to execute something like that. Gulp, gulp, gulp. That's why reviews can be so helpful. Makes you take a step out of your own perspective and see through someone else's eyeballs. Doesn't mean you always have to agree, because sometimes even I read reviews and I'm like, bruh, did we even read the same book? I don't think so. Next up, I'm getting rid of the Sisters Grimm. This follows half-sisters who were separated as kids, and they're all working to be reunited so that they can hone their magical abilities together. I do sometimes hang on to pretty books, but then I realize that their prettiness does nothing if the insides are not filled to the brim with goodness. Sometimes I'm like, maybe this pretty cover is a cocoon and a beautiful butterfly is gonna come out and wow me. But nope, not always. Sometimes yes, but again, not always. This book was like a full-on ping-pong moment with how much it switched perspectives. Like almost every paragraph, it was switching perspectives. I was getting brain whiplash with how much it flip-flopped, and I love a book that has a lot of perspectives. But when it's changing nearly every paragraph, eviction notice has arrived. Get off my bookshelf. Next, I'm getting rid of A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow. This book was sent to me unsolicited. In this book, we follow a girl named Lila who is spending her summer in England. She has all these plans set, but everything ends up going south. The trip begins to feel like a nightmare, that is until she meets this guy named Oren. I've read maybe like the first 50 pages of it and I just was not vibing with the material. A part of me was like, maybe I should keep reading, get further into it, but I just couldn't do it. It's honestly sending me signals being like, don't get rid of me, hold on to me, Jack, don't let go. Sorry, but you know what Jack did. I just feel like when you have this like distaste feeling right off the bat, it's a pretty sure sign that you should just part ways, like more times than not. Obviously there are the times when it starts out a little rough and you get in deeper and you're like, oh, I actually really like this. But I decided to end things before I got in too deep. Always follow your gut. I mean, it is romance focused, so what do you expect from me? Clearly not much. Okay, I'm gonna group these last books together. My cousin started work as a teacher at a new school this year, and she asked me to compile a list of books for her class. I just decided to go through my middle grade section and pick out a few of the books from there to hand over to her classroom. I actually don't have too many that I'm giving her, but I feel like this is a good start. We've got Pax, which I've already read this book, and I really enjoyed it. I actually just recently got sent a second copy, so I'm going to be handing her over this one. Next up I have here The Boundless. This is a fun adventure that takes place on a train. Next up I have this short story collection full of a variety of different short stories, and this was put together by the We Need Diverse Books organization. Then I have here Wonder. Honestly, I don't know if I will ever read this book. I have tried to read it so many times now, and I can just never get into it. I feel like it's best to just pass it on to my cousin's classroom where somebody hopefully will read it and get a lot out of it. Next we've got Winterborn Home for Vengeance and Valor. I actually really enjoyed this book, but I just feel like it'd be perfect for my cousin's classroom, so I'm gonna pass it along. This is essentially a mystery that takes place at a boarding school. Alright guys, these are the books that I'm unhauling. I honestly probably could have gotten rid of more off my bookshelf if I'm being honest, but it's hard. It's hard getting rid of books. Much harder than you would think. I just have this weird attachment to books that I've read. I'm like, I put in work reading you, and I don't want to get rid of you. Also, if you're wondering where most of these books are going, they're all going to be going to my local indie bookstore because they can either resell them in their used book section or they can donate them to the library, whatever they prefer to do. I just like supporting my local indie, and this is a great way to do that. If you ever clean off your bookshelves and get rid of books, I highly recommend checking in with your local indie to see if they take in used books. You guys should let me know down below in the comments if you have gotten rid of any books lately, and if so, what book was it and why did you get rid of it? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like this video, be sure to go and hit that like button. If you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe or go and hit that bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope your day is bright, that tomorrow is brighter. Keep reading what your heart desires, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye yo! It's like the... Woo!